Welcome to TORAH Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with a new show, a brand new pilot, Kosher Kitchen with Rabbi Chayim Zirkind on Facebook. Welcome to the show, Rabbi. It's such a pleasure having you here. Glad to finally get this thing kicked off. This hopefully will be a smooth sailing, nice, fun show for everybody. My wife has been... Yeah, me too. Let's see how that goes. And so my wife has been asking me about getting somebody on, and I have a feeling she'll be asking questions tonight as well. And so hopefully we'll have the callers call in. Also, I'm going to log us in right now. Let me downsize that. And okay, we are officially 3, 2, 1. We are signed in. And the phone number will actually be on your screen in just a moment. I knew I forgot something. Ha ha ha. Hey, man, you know what? If I was perfect, I might be confused for someone else. All right, let's see. Give me 1 second. So welcome to the show. While I'm actually pulling this other thing up, I'd just like to introduce you to everyone. This is Rabbi Chayim Zirkind. I ran into him through Facebook. A lot of people on Facebook, they would say, William, you should do a show on kosher and kosher kitchen, and they recommended me to this rabbi. And so we had a chance to talk a while back and had a really good conversation, and we just thought this would be a good little test run to see. And so I guess this show could go forever. But we'll just play it out each week, every 2 weeks when we try to show up. Today will be just an introduction. I'm going to let Rabbi introduce himself, tell you his background, credentials, etc. And then if y'all don't call in with questions, I'm going to start hammering them with questions. So I'd rather have your questions. But I do have some of my own, and my wife does too. So it'll be fun. So Rabbi, okay. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to see you here.
Thank you very much. Likewise. My name is Rabbi Zirkind. I grew up in Crown Heights, and I studied in the Lubavitch Yeshiva, Rabbinical College of America, and I was involved with koshering homes. While I was in Yeshiva, I used to kosher homes a lot. Then I got married, and then I started working as a mashgiach, as a rabbinical supervision for kosher kitchens. So while I was doing that, I realized that there are a lot of things actually to find that actually we don't find in groups or whatever, is basically how to keep a kosher kitchen. So I decided to start this group called Kosher Kitchen for a very simple reason, just that people that have questions or people have thoughts or somehow something to that effect can feel free to post or so on and so forth. So I just want to, right off the bat, I just want to say one thing. It's a discussion. If you have a legitimate question, you should always ask your rabbi a question, because each individual question has more to it than just what we ask. For example, there's a famous story of this woman comes to a rabbi who's right before Shabbos with a question on a chicken, wanted to know if it was kosher or not. The rabbi looked at it and said it was kosher, and she left. After she left, his student said, I don't understand. How did you just come to that quick judgment call, say it's kosher, when it was really a discussion in the Talmud, not that clear. So he said, I know her financial situation, and it's right before Shabbos. If I say that it's not kosher, she's not going to have food for Shabbos. So that's why a question has to be, every question, or as they say, there is no such thing of a stupid question. Right. A stupid question is a question not asked. So therefore, when somebody has a question, they should never think not to burden the rabbi or so on and so forth. First of all, that's what he's there for. Whether he's getting paid or not, that's what he's there for. If he took upon himself that job to be that role model, to be the person that you ask all your halacha questions, then you should ask every question if you have a question. It doesn't annoy the rabbi. That's what he's there for. And it's also, don't be your own rabbi. It's a very important thing to remember. Do not be your own rabbi. If you feel that there's a question, you should ask, because otherwise you run into I thought, I didn't know. Now you got bigger problems because now you have a kitchen that's questionable whether it's kosher or not. So it's not anymore the question of that pot of meat. The question is now, what about the dishes that you use? What about the utensils you use? So always ask a rabbi that if you ever have a question of something with the utensil or anything, put it aside. Don't wash it. Don't try to clean it. Just leave it. Put it aside. So that way the rabbi could ask all the questions, then he could explain to you what's the proper way of dealing with it. Because once you wash it, now you got a sponge involved, now you got a sink involved, you have dishes in the sink, so it gets a little more complicated. So the best thing is, whenever you have a question, always ask a rabbi, and don't be your own rabbi. There was actually a rabbi that I'm pretty friendly with. He told me a fascinating story. This is about the laws of home purity. I know it's not about food, but he was telling me that his wife came back from the mikveh, that's the ritual bath, and she had a question. She did all the preparation, but there was one thing she missed, she forgot or whatever. Now she had a question whether she had to go back to the mikveh. And the husband is a rabbi, and he answers all these questions for everyone else. She said to him, do not answer that question. You have to ask a rabbi. Because don't be your own rabbi.
Wow.
This man happens to be, he's a rocket scientist. He's a genius. That's his profession. He's a genius. But he told me, she said, do not answer that question. She said, I'm telling you the story in order that you should call a rabbi to ask, because you cannot be your own rabbi. So it's very important to realize that if you have a question, there is no such a thing of a stupid question. Anybody that, the slightest thing, which you think is not a question, could actually be a big question. Like the Torah says, don't push aside one mitzvah, one precept to do another, because we don't know the reward for this one. Why are you pushing it aside? How do you know that this mitzvah is smaller than that mitzvah? Who are we to judge? Just if a mitzvah comes our way, we're supposed to grab the opportunity and do it. Don't say, I'm going to wait for the next one, the bigger one. How do we know this isn't the bigger one? How do we know this is not what our life, why we're here, why we were put in this world, was just to perform this one mitzvah? We don't know. Therefore, whenever it comes to a mitzvah, grab the opportunity. Don't push it aside to do something bigger. So the same thing is, whenever you have a question or anything, don't think that, this is a small question, this is an irrelevant question, you're just going to laugh at me. No. If a rabbi laughs at you, you question his profession, not your question.
Well, it's interesting to know that it's a lot deeper than just what's written down on paper. There's a lot of heart and a lot of judgment calls and things, and it's nice to know that the rabbis are able to do that under each circumstance. It makes it seem more intimate and personal that way. So
it has to be.
So before we get too far,
I'll tell you,
go ahead.
I just want to interrupt you for 1 second.
Sure.
I'll tell you something interesting. I also write scrolls, and the reason why I'm saying that is because it's very interesting. You say there's a lot more that meets the eye. So there's a fundamental law when it comes to writing a scroll, that if you write a letter, right, and you don't know if that letter is, let's say you look at it, okay, you're supposed to write, let's say, a base, right? Mm-hmm. Now, a base is square. It's actually a square letter.
Right.
But what happens if it's rounded in a section? So the question is, now you don't know, can I consider this a base, or perhaps somebody will call it a chaf? So now I got a problem. So Code of Jewish Law, halacha says you have to bring it to a child and ask a child.
Oh, wow.
Because a child that's not an intelligent child, a child that's not, it's that he's not a fool and he's not brilliant.
Right.
Bring it to an average child and let the child tell you what that letter is. If he calls it properly, then it's kosher. If not, it's invalid.
Wow, that is so cool.
You see,
wow.
Yeah, so a child has a lot to do in the scheme of things. A child is very much involved with it. That you see, even a Torah, you think as scholars they discuss how the letter should be written, whether it's this way or that way. But at the end of the day, is you have to ask a child if it's a kosher letter or not. So the rabbi could have the longest beard or whatever, the biggest fur hat or whatever he's wearing, doesn't mean anything. It's up to a child that
Wow,
you
that's
know,
deep.
is an average child.
That is deep. That is deep. Okay, cool. This is going to be a fun class. Okay,
I hope.
let's. Okay, so I want to back up. I just want to. I want you to tell everybody a little bit more about yourself. Let's start with a little bit of your background. We don't need a full testimony like from when you was a kid, but I mean, just I guess you could say, since this is a show on Kosher Kitchen, a lot of people are going to say, well, who's this guy's Rebbe, whatever. So tell us a little bit about.
Okay, so I learned under in Lubavitch when I went. I learned in 770. That's where I learned for the Smicha program. So in those days, it was Rabbi Pekarsky, Olav Sholem. He was the Rosh Yeshiva, and he's the one that basically he was the one that would test us, and it was always fun when he tested us because he would drill and grill till we figured out what he wanted. You could just picture sitting in front of an old rabbi, and he's sitting there, and he never seemed to be satisfied with the answer you gave him. He wanted to know deeper. He wanted to really hear how you thought. If somebody comes over to you and it says, I have a fork. Here's a dairy fork, and I ate meat with it. Okay. So now it's not just the dairy fork. It's not just the what happens to the plate. And so he wanted to know what is the law. Now, just don't tell me, yes, this is kosher, not kosher. What are you basing it on? In Hebrew law, it's a fundamental thing. If somebody tells you that this is law, you have to be able to give a place of reference. You can't just say, I said something. You have to tell them, if I tell you that the Torah says there's the concept of eating kosher, the concept of not cooking milk and meat is from 3 verses that say, Lo yisavashel gedi b'chalev imay, that you should not cook a goat in its mother's milk. So the Torah says that 3 times. So the person that says that should really be able to tell you where that is stated. Because okay, so those are from 3 famous verses, 3 famous psukim in the Torah, and those 3, that's where we learn the 3 concepts of do not cook, do not eat, and do not derive any pleasure. So if somebody says, okay, so where does it say this and this thing? So for example, you could say, okay, Maimonides speaks about that in chapter 10, let's say, where he speaks about the concept of cooking milk and meat. So it's always, you should always, if somebody tells you something in Hebrew law, you should try to get where he's getting it from. You should ask where he's getting it from, because that way you know and you feel comfortable with the answer. Because if he tells you that this pot of stew that you just made is non-kosher, now there goes your supper. At least you'll feel better knowing that it wasn't just this one man's opinion, that it actually he's basing it on something.
Right, that makes sense. Wow.
So I learned. So then I learned it. Then after I got married, I actually worked at Brandeis University as their mashgiach, their rabbinical. I ran the kosher kitchen there for about 22 years. So
Wow.
Yeah.
So
that's where I got my experience with all kinds of interesting questions. It was fun.
That sounds cool. I mean, I know if my wife could take her, well, if it was allowable, because she loves doing food, and she loves the idea of these rabbis being able to go in and put their mark on in the dairies and stuff, and saying, yep, that's good to go. So it's quite fascinating. So it's neat that you actually are involved in teaching halakha on kosher kitchens, which means you would know about meats and handling. There's so many questions that people have. There's even people who are not Jewish yet, but they're going to be converting, or they're planning on converting, and they really want to start ahead of time, and they're wanting to move forward. And as far as that goes, and learning the kosher laws for your kitchen, learning what milk and meat and parve, and all these things. And so yeah, it's just going to be pretty neat. I really hope we get a couple calls come in. So I'll put the number on the screen right now, as a matter of fact. I thought I had it up there.
I just want to say an interesting thing. When you speak about the mitzvah of eating kosher, is not like other mitzvahs. In other words, the question, does a Gentile have to eat kosher? No. Nowhere does it say a Gentile has to keep kosher. Right. A Gentile has the 7 Noahide laws. in those 7 Noahide laws, okay, so it does speak about not eating a limb from a living creature. That it does, but not eating kosher is not. It doesn't make a Gentile less of a mensch, less of a person because he eats non-kosher. A Gentile has the right to eat non-kosher, and actually you see clearly they eat non-kosher and they're healthier. They're healthy people. So it's not that, oh, if I keep kosher, will I be healthier? I've seen people that keep kosher and they struggle with weight issues, and I've seen people that eat non-kosher and they also struggle with weight issues. It doesn't mean that it's because of the kosher diet or lack thereof. It's people need food. Why do you eat? Why do we eat? Okay, but why do we eat? The reason we eat is because we have to have strength in order to serve Hashem. That's why we eat. If we're eating for our own pleasure, that's a problem. That could become a problem because that's already doing things for ourselves. The idea of eating is in order to elevate the food. To elevate the food, when you make a bracha before it, they make sure it's kosher. That's how you elevate the food. So the question is, what about, let's say I make a bracha and I have a steak, right? So what about the pig? How does the pig get elevated? The pig gets elevated by you making a bracha on your steak. It includes all the animal kingdom. They are all elevated because of your bracha that you made on that piece of kosher meat. So it's not like the poor pig doesn't have has no spiritual elevation, or whether if it's a donkey or something like that. When a person makes a bracha and eats a piece of meat, he's elevating all the meats. When he makes a bracha on a piece of bread, he's elevating all the grains. So it's not like, well, this one is lucky. I got to make a bracha on him, but what about that loaf of bread that somebody else is buying that's not kosher or that's not Jewish? What happens to that? That piece of bread is also elevated. When you make a bracha, that elevates that. So the idea of making a bracha is because you have to thank Hashem for giving you the food, because everything in this world belongs to God. So therefore, if you eat something without making a bracha, it's a question of stealing from Hashem because it's not yours. So therefore, you have by making a bracha, Hashem is giving you permission to eat it. Therefore, it's very important to make a bracha.
Nice.
And that's why it's very important to make a bracha on kosher food, because that's how you elevate it.
Nice. Okay, let's go ahead and take the caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Good evening, William. This is Fernando Colon from South Carolina.
Hey,
again.
Shalom, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'll be quick. I'll ask the rabbi a question that it's a complex question, but I'll make it brief and to the point.
Okay.
How do you get those people that recently converted to Judaism, or those who are Jewish that decided to come back to the faith but never kept kosher? How do you get them started? That's the first point. And the second point, how those same people, how can they start kasherizing their kitchen, if they can do it on their by themselves, or if they need a specialist or someone trained in doing that? That's my question.
Nice. Good questions. Thank you, Fernando.
Okay, so it's actually very good questions.
Right.
I was very involved with that before I got married. That was when I was in yeshiva to learn for the smicha program. That was one thing I did, was to kasher homes and speak with people about eating kosher. So it's a great question. So what we used to do was we used to speak to the people and discuss with them what kosher is, how to sort of do a practice run for a couple of weeks, get comfortable with it, keep everything separate, keep one set of dishes for dairy, one set of dishes for meat, one set of cutlery for this, and to keep everything separate. Get used to it, because once you make it kosher and you're not comfortable with it, within a week you're gonna have all those pots and pans back to square one. That because you're not familiar with it. So how do you tell somebody to keep kosher? So I heard a very interesting thing. What are we really? We are called lamplighters. That's what we're called. What does that mean? That our job as individuals is to be a lamplighter. If you see somebody else that's in the dark, we're supposed to ignite the fire that brings him back to light. So it doesn't have to be a rabbi. It doesn't have to be anybody. Everybody is special, but it doesn't have to be somebody that's certified that could only tell you to keep kosher. If you know somebody that doesn't keep kosher, it is kind of an obligation on our part to try to reach out to them, because they might not know. So not everybody that's not keeping kosher, that doesn't mean, if somebody doesn't keep kosher, it doesn't mean that they're doing it despite. They might be doing it because they don't know any better. So it's kind of our obligation. When you see somebody, let's, for example, if you see a kid that's going to run across the street, even if he's not your child, you're going to kind of go over and make sure he doesn't do that. So the same thing is when it comes to anything in religion, anything in Yiddishkeit. If you see somebody that's, let's say a person doesn't put on tefillin, for example, and you have a pair of tefillin, there's nothing to be ashamed of in going over to that person saying, would you like to put on tefillin today? There's nothing wrong with that. People think it's, I don't think he's got. Well, the worst case scenario, he says no. Best case scenario, he puts on tefillin. The same thing is when it comes to kosher.
Right.
What do I tell somebody that wants to keep kosher? What I tell them is I will sit down and I'll explain to them the laws of kosher, what it means to have separate dishes, because milk and meat you can't eat together, and you can't cook things together with milk and meat, so everything has to be separate. The same way you have a kitchen, now you're going to need 2 kitchens, but you don't need physically 2 kitchens. You're just going to need 2 separate compartments, one for the dairy side, one for the meat side. Most people have 1 oven and 1 stove. So how do they do it? So, for example, we primarily cook meat because Shabbos comes a holiday, so most of us will eat meat. So we have a little toaster oven for the dairy. So that's how we do. So we don't have 2 separate ovens or 2 separate refrigerators.
Right.
We compartmental things. That's what we do. So it keeps it all separate. Now, to kosherize the house, I would suggest get a hold of your rabbi. And I'm going to say Orthodox, not to start to nitpick, but the reason why I say an Orthodox is because he will do it based on what the Torah says, based on what halacha, what Hebrew law asks of us to do. So you don't have questions down the line. If somebody comes over to your house, you say you're kosher, you say, well, who's the one that helped you? You say, Rabbi so-and-so from the conservative temple. They might not eat there. Now you're offended.
Right.
Because, you just, what do you mean? I just made this house kosher. Yeah, but not according to the standards of what the Torah necessarily asks. They might do it. I'm not saying they don't, but just if you want people to be comfortable in your house, go the extra mile. Make sure it's kosher, that nobody will question it.
Right.
And that's there. The best thing is to contact your local Orthodox rabbi, and they will guide you, and they will usually tell you who to call. There are people that do that type of work, and it's better to get somebody that knows what they're doing, because when you kosher something, the way something becomes non-kosher, that's the way you make it kosher. For example, when certain things need to be boiled and need to be put into boiling water, certain things need to be burnt out with a fire. So somebody that does this often knows, okay, generally speaking, most dishes that are boiling water, but there's a period of time that it has to stay in there. So you want to make sure you got that right. Then you want to make sure that there's a rapid boil. So there are a lot of little details that make it kosher. So it's not just I could just do it. I could stick my fork in the boiling water and then pull it out. You do that, you might be screaming from pain because you might forget that water is boiling. So those that do it usually have the proper equipment. So it's basically, don't try this at home.
Right, gotcha. Okay, let's go and take this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hey, it's Jason.
Hey, my friend Jason, Green Acres Pest Control. How are you, brother?
How y'all doing today?
Doing good.
I had to call because I go in a lot of kitchens, and I mean it's my job because I'm pest control. And what I was wondering is, in a situation where someone has a problem with, say, an animal that wouldn't be considered a clean animal, like mice or cockroaches,
that would be interesting.
or something it's a serious problem, but they're trying to take care of it and everything, and eventually the rodent or the insect will be gone from the kitchen. But if they're having a problem where these things are coming in their home on a daily basis, would it be something you would have to actually avidly be koshering your kitchen every single day? Or how would you go about in a situation like that?
It's a great question, because growing up in New York, we would be koshering the houses every day. So you don't have to. What makes something kosher, what makes something non-kosher is usually through cooking, heat transfer. That's what makes it non-kosher. In other words, it's only through boiling, cooking, something that stays in a sharp, let's say a salt or a vinegar. That's how it becomes non-kosher. In other words, if I take a piece of meat and I cook it, and I take a non-kosher piece of meat and I cook it in a pot, how did I make the pot non-kosher? Was through cooking the non-kosher piece of meat. So the rodents do not make it non-kosher, because all they're doing is running back and forth. They are not. If anybody's cooking it, they got a whole other issue going. That's a whole other issue. Interesting question. There's just one thing I want to say about, let's say, a cockroach. You mentioned a cockroach. So what happens if I take tea, right? I have a cup of hot tea, and a fly flies into it. A fly is non-kosher. A cockroach falls into it. A cockroach is not kosher. Does that make that cup non-kosher? I'm sitting there, I'm having a hot cup of tea, and I look inside, I see there's a fly in there. Does that make the cup non-kosher? The answer is no. Why? Because the cockroach is not kosher, the fly is not kosher, but it doesn't make the cup non-kosher because it is gross. Nobody's going to drink it. Nobody's going to eat it. That's why it doesn't make it non-kosher. It's only if it's something that's going to be something that's edible, that's when it makes it non-kosher. But if something that's gross to you does not make the cup.
That's really interesting too. And Jason, I'm sorry, brother, but I had to hang up because the phone line started chirping like really loud in the room, and I couldn't.
He's a pest control. So it's
he's chirping. Okay, so to kind of add to that question, what if I was told one time, like pigs, for example. Now, what I'm fixing to say may not be like technically correct, but it was a funny saying, and it made sense to me. It helped me kind of understand something. But I said the pigs are kosher unless they're dead. So a live pig, if you touch a live pig, if you pet a cat, if you pet a dog, that there's nothing wrong with that. But if you touch a dead dog or a dead cat or a dead pig, whether it's on your plate or out in your yard, that's unclean, not unkosher, but unclean, where you have to wash and do all the stuff. So with that said, and first of all, I may be wrong, and if I am, correct me on that, but with that said, what if a dead cockroach fell in your cup? And let's say you was going for coffee and you looked in there and there was in your empty cup that was washed and cleaned, and there was a dead cockroach or a dead fly in it. Would that matter?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't. I would wash the cup again before I use
it. Yeah, that certainly.
Unless you like that taste, but
that's funny.
Good luck with that one. I don't think that's. I saw an interesting article. It says that the Japanese are very into this tea. That's what do they call it? What kind of tea is it? I forgot already. They say how it's supposed to be very good for you.
Japanese tea, like green tea or something?
Leaf. A black green tea, something like that.
Okay, gotcha.
But it doesn't say anything about roaches, so I think you're on your own with that one. If you like the roaches, hey.
There you go. So if you like roach flavor,
you have a whole other issue going on. It's not
Oh man,
but
that's funny.
Yeah, but you do. But the interesting thing is, these are things that you will find inevitably. You wash dishes, you put them away, whatever. The summer comes, and then you pick them up. There's a dead something in there, whatever. It doesn't make it non-kosher. You just wash it, and, So let me I want to touch on one thing. There's this whole thing about vegetables, about checking vegetables.
Oh,
for
yeah,
bugs and
like
so
in
on and
between
so
the
forth.
kernels of corn on a stalk or something like that, where you can't see.
Okay,
right?
So it's an interesting concept. They have this whole thing when you have to check the vegetables, make sure there are no bugs in it. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard that you can, if something is accidentally in there, it's not a big deal. You can move it out of the way. But I've heard that you have to, just like with corn stalkers, for example.
No, I'm talking about like lettuces, like leafy lettuce. Take for example romaine lettuce.
Right.
So the problem is that when I look at the lettuce, I can find teeny bugs.
Okay.
So the thing is that those bugs are non-kosher, and we're not allowed to eat them. So we wash them in such a way that we wash them and then we check them to make sure that there are no bugs in there.
So like with the head of lettuce, you peel off each leaf and then kind of wash it down and kind of break it apart leaf by leaf.
Especially when it comes to like romaine lettuce, there are a lot of vegetables there are a lot of vegetables that are leafy and they have a lot of
hiding places,
a lot of bugs in them.
Right.
So you really do have to check them to make sure that they don't have bugs. But some people go a little beyond the call of duty. They have light tables and magnifying glasses. There is. I saw in a sefer from Rabbi Feinstein Oliver Shalom. He writes that you do not have to check it with binoculars, with magnifying glasses.
Right.
You look at the vegetable. If you see it, you take it off. If you don't see it, you're good to go. So sometimes people go a little overboard. I don't know if I saw it. I didn't see it. They spend more time checking the lettuce than they do that it takes them to eat the whole meal.
Right.
So you don't have to go crazy. It says you look at it, you make sure you wash it, you look at it and see if you see anything. You don't have to come with investigating lights, to see if you're guilty or not with those heat lamps, that are shining on your face. Are you kosher? You just have to check and see that it's okay. Some places we check the vegetables, so they have people that check it. But in your house, when you go buy vegetables, it's important to make sure that you do not have bugs in them, but you don't have to go overboard. You don't have to start coming out with magnifying glasses to check each leaf.
Right, gotcha.
That it doesn't stick.
Gotcha. Wow. Those are some good questions, man. I never thought about that. Okay, so one final thing. Okay, so let's say that you do have a mice or whatever infestation, and you find an actual dead mouse in your stove, and maybe for some reason there was fluids from this thing in your stove. What do you do with your stove at that point? Just wash it and you move on, like just generally just bleach the area, or do you have to have that thing koshered?
Okay, so let me ask you this question.
Okay.
You see, I think that's a great analogy. That's a great question. I'll tell you why. Okay, so you call me up and you say, I found a dead mouse in my oven. Okay, is it dead? Was the oven cooked? In other words, was it cooked? Is it So it goes into it's a gross scenario.
Right, but it needs to be explained, scenario, right?
But it does have to. It's what. Okay, so let's say you found a dead mouse in your oven. Most people, you look in your oven before you put something in.
Right.
So therefore, all that happened was it died in there. So I would take it out and scrub that oven. And if you don't, do not invite me for dinner, please. I don't like mice. But you should take
it.
But
it doesn't need to be. But it doesn't need to be koshered, though, right?
You just find a dead mouse. I mean, it ate poison or whatever goes in there, and it's found a warm place. In the winter, you find that. And
right.
I'm up north. I'm in Massachusetts. You find I don't find them in my oven, thank God, but they tend to go into warm places. So it could die there. That doesn't mean you have to kosher it, but you should clean it.
That's good to know.
That's good.
That's cool.
It's kind of gross.
Right, Chrissy. You have any questions? When can he come for dinner? What? I'm just kidding.
Make sure no mice, no bugs.
Yeah.
I don't like mice.
Yeah, same here. I've got enough mice sitting on my desktop right now.
Oh, those are always good. Those are not, by the way, those are not peppercorns. Those are mouse trappings. Everything.
Oh my gosh! All right, good timing. Welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from. Caller, can you hear us? I've got the volume up. They may or may not. Oh, you know what? Apparently they disconnected because they already hung up.
So I'm just gonna say, it's always important to learn a lot from. Every day a person should partake in learning something. So I just want to learn. This is from Maimonides. It's
okay.
chapter 9, So it says, it is forbidden to cook meat and milk together and to partake of them according to scriptural law. It is forbidden to benefit from such a mixture. It must be buried. Its ashes are forbidden, like the ashes of all substance that must be buried. Whenever a person cooks an olive-sized portion of the two substances together, he is worthy of lashes. As it says in Exodus, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Similarly, a person who partakes of an olive-sized portion of the meat and milk that were cooked together is worthy of lashes, even though he was not the one who cooked them. By the way, these lashes are not kinky lashes. These suckers hurt.
Wow.
That was my interpretation. That's not what Maimonides says.
Oh,
He doesn't speak about the kinky lashes.
Right. Okay.
They just don't get think, wait, it lashes. This sounds good. No, it's not. These lashes hurt. Those suckers hurt.
That's funny. Wow. That's not funny at all, actually. No kidding. Jeez.
But so the point over here is that it's okay. So I'll ask a question. So why does it say the term is used? Do not cook a goat in its mother's. Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Why does the Torah use the word kid?
Right. Is that what it says in Hebrew? Also says kid.
Yeah,
As well?
That is forbidden to cook. Hold on a second. Where am I? Yeah, you should not cook a goat in its mother's milk. So the Torah speaks what's called in Hebrew lashon b'nei adam. The Torah speaks like people speak, meaning to say that was a common thing that people cook that together. So the Torah says don't cook that together, which actually includes all beefs. It doesn't mean specifically just goat.
Okay. Do you want to go take this call?
Whatever. I got nothing else to do.
Okay. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hey, it's Julie calling from Alaska.
Julie, how are you?
Oh, Alaska.
Good, how are you guys?
Is it cold yet?
I can't hear you guys very well.
Oh,
What'd you say?
Is it cold yet? He said.
It is very cold. It's raining and windy, and I'm kind of smelling snow any day.
As long as you're not smelling a dead rat in your oven, we're good.
Hey, I happen to like the Ice Road Truckers show. Okay.
Oh, I've seen that. That's really cool.
That's a good show.
Yeah, I happen to like that because it just fascinates me how people would do anything for a buck.
Yeah,
That's true.
you are not even lying.
I'm Jewish, but you know what? I draw the line somewhere. It was funny. Somebody at work was asking. He said, "You're Hasidic, no?" So I said, "Yes." They said, "Why aren't you into diamonds?" I said, "Because I wasn't that lucky." I mean, really? What kind of question is that?
Yeah.
So
that's funny.
I'm Jewish, but hey, I draw the line when it comes to being insane.
Awesome. Julie, do you have a question for Rabbi?
Well, I've been sitting here listening and trying to think of the hardest question I can think of.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks. I hope you didn't find one.
So, well, actually, so my question is, being in Alaska and hunting is really big up here. A lot of people live off the land. They shoot moose and caribou and other animals. So my question is, how would you kosher slaughter a wild animal?
Okay, it's a great question, actually. The Torah actually says, it's actually explained, why did the Torah specify what constitutes a kosher animal? It says it has to chew its cud and have split hooves. Why does it have to say that? What is, what are we, farmers? What do we need to know that? So it says, for that reason, that if you're out in the wilderness and you find an animal, the way you could ascertain that it's kosher is if it has those two characteristics to it. So, but an animal, to make it kosher, has to be slaughtered properly. The reason why it's slaughtered, the knife has to be extremely sharp, cannot have any nicks or bangs in it. It has to be, if you ever felt the knives that they use, it literally feels like it's like a dream. It just goes, your fingernail goes up and down, glides on it. You won't feel a nick in it. The reason for that is because when a person slaughters an animal, it has to be quick and painless. You cannot use a serrated knife like a song. It's not supposed to be any pain. It's supposed to be very quick, and that's why, people say slaughtering is inhumane. Actually, it is the most, according to the Torah, that is the most humane way of killing an animal, because the knife is very sharp, extremely sharp, and it's very quick.
And
it's
you
not,
don't really feel it.
they don't feel it, and also they're not supposed to apply pressure. There's certain ways that they're supposed to do it that there's no pressure. You're not supposed to snap. You're not supposed to snap the neck. You're not supposed to cut it. Like you're cutting a tough piece of steak. You're not supposed to cut it that way. It's supposed to glide across.
Wow.
So there is no pain.
Hey,
It's actually the most humane.
Right.
One time I was on
So
a job site, Rabbi, and I was cutting plastic to hang on a wall to kind of mask off for the ceiling, and I had this little razor blade. Y'all know which ones I'm talking about. It's got like a bent piece of protective metal over one side and a flat razor blade, so you can scrape window glass.
Yeah.
So I would use that. I would take this razor blade, and I would cut the plastic across this little 24-inch wide box. I used it kind of as a guide, and I would take the razor blade and stick it in the lid so I wouldn't lose it. It wouldn't drop it. I knew right where it was at. And one day I was doing the same old thing, and I went up there and hung the plastic, came down and pulled out, grabbed another piece. But this time when I came down to grab the piece, I was looking up at the wall trying to see how much wall space I needed. As I was reaching down, the razor blade, it was a new razor blade, was sticking through the lid of the box, and it actually cut me from knuckle to knuckle on one finger. I never even felt it. In fact, I'm sitting here looking up, and I reach down, I kind of do a real quick grab, and I'm walking up the ladder still looking up, and the guy that I'm working with is like, "Dude, you're bleeding everywhere," and I thought he was joking. I never felt it. Even after 30 seconds or so, I didn't even know I got cut, but it cut it really, really deep. So a surgically sharp razor blade is completely painless if you don't know what's happening.
You might need to see a psychiatrist. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Maybe it was
other issues.
Maybe it was the paint fumes that.
It's just like, yeah, you didn't feel it, really.
Julie,
How's
what
that
were
working out for you?
Julie, what were you saying?
Okay, so basically, if you shoot an animal, that's not kosher.
That's not kosher anymore.
Wow.
Okay.
So you can't shoot it with a gun or an arrow?
Correct.
Wow.
It has to
I
slaughter
could see
an
that.
animal,
That makes sense. Yeah.
It has to be an animal that will live for a year, meaning to say that it's a healthy animal. You cannot take a dying animal that has all kinds of illnesses and slaughter it. That's why it's also after they slaughter it, they check the lungs to make sure that the lungs are healthy, because it has to be from a healthy animal.
But I mean, a deer in the field is healthy. I mean, but you're saying that you can't even.
But you can't, no, now it's not healthy anymore. Once you shoot it, it's not healthy. It's not going to live.
Interesting. Okay.
So I'm gonna have to get my mad. I'm gonna have to get my mad cowgirl skills out and go out and rope this thing, and then
Yeah, that's it. You're just gonna have to go with rope and. Just,
oh man, that's interesting, man.
I'll jump on its back and slit its throat. How about that?
Wow.
No, but you have to be careful, because
traumatize
you have to hold out, not just slitting its throat. You have to hold. There's a technique.
There's that chirping again. Julie, I'm going to have to hang up because it's chirping really loud. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing that. I'll try to look into it.
She's in the wilderness already.
She's chirping.
You have to hold the neck. You have to hold all there are several things that have to be cut. There are the windpipe, the food pipe, all kinds of things have to be cut. So they have to be held very tight. So when they go across it, they cut everything right away.
All at one swipe, all in one slide, right?
Correct. So it's basically, they have to be able to glide back and forth, and not that things are moving around. You have to hold everything that has to be slaughtered has to be held tight, and then they go across and slice it.
And realistically, if I was surviving like she was saying, and I knew that she couldn't shoot one, if I actually was in a tree and I jumped on a deer, wouldn't that make it panic and all of a sudden, adrenaline and all this other stuff? So if I slit its throat, then that would be unkosher too, right?
Actually, that is a big problem,
right? Because
if it's frightened, now the heartstrings,
right? Oh, right.
So that also becomes a problem.
Okay.
So it's not that simple. Everything has to. even when they're actually in slaughterhouses, they have to be very careful. Like another animal cannot see the slaughter of one animal cannot see the slaughter of another animal because it frightens them, and if it frightens them, they can't be slaughtered because they sort of get scared and their heart shrinks and all that. So there are a lot of
right.
There are a lot of things that it's very humane. As much as people think it's inhumane, but it's actually very humane to slaughter an animal.
Right.
If you're going to eat people, but you have to remember. Let me just say one thing. Today's day and age, this is for all the vegetarians or the vegans out there. Today's day and age, you do not need to have meat or poultry to celebrate the Shabbos or the Yom Tov, where it says you're supposed to eat nice meat and all that. That was only the time that was when the Beis Hamikdash existed. Today's day and age, we do not need that. You can have a decent meal. You can have with cheese or things like that. For vegans, they don't eat cheese. Good luck with the tofu.
Right.
But I always wonder if tofu was like what it was in the midbar. It says that we had the man. I always said maybe it was tofu. It says it was a white substance. Maybe it was tofu. Some say it tasted whatever you wanted it to taste like. Tofu, pretty much like that. It's a sponge. Whatever you want it to taste like, it tasted like.
Interesting.
So, but back to today's day and age, you do not have to have meat at a Shabbos meal in order to fulfill the mitzvah of having meat and you have a good meal. You could do it with other things. You do not have to have meat or poultry. So it's not like people say, "Oh, if I'm a vegetarian, what do? You could have cheese. You could have cheese. You could have other things that are grains, things like that.
What if you go to? Actually, I think I already know the answer to this, but I need to ask it anyway. Let's say that I'm trying to again, I'm going to convert to Judaism. I want to eat kosher, so I go to a what do you call the place where they cut up? Not the deli, the butchers. They go to a butcher shop, right?
Butcher shop.
Yeah, and they use the same. It's interesting. If I didn't know they actually had a bandsaw, but yeah, they used a bandsaw to cut up larger, sections of animals. Could I buy a piece of lamb from this thing, knowing that he used the same bandsaw to cut up pork with?
No, because that's the same thing as the sharp. You remember we said about sharp foods, cooking?
Yep, right.
That's the same thing with a knife. Anything that's sharp, it transfers flavor.
Gotcha.
So even a blade is the same thing.
What if he used a new blade, but just used the same deck that was there and just washed it off and switched blades between them?
Okay, this you'll ask me private because I ain't going to get in trouble over this one over
Okay, we'll talk about it later.
But I'll tell you one thing.
Okay.
But again, everything has a rhyme or reason.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
I'll get because take for example, so what do I have? All I have is a blade going in a circle.
Yep.
Okay. But I have problems. What are the problems? That no matter how well they clean it, for the sake of conversation, I know those bandsaws. I've worked in those plants.
Okay.
No matter how well you clean it, you open that door to change the blade, you're going to find all kinds of stuff in that week.
Right.
So again, are you willing to risk? Are you willing to risk if the Torah tells you to be careful? Are you willing to risk it?
Yeah, right.
Let me ask you this question: if I have a jar of M&Ms, and one of those M&Ms are tainted, would you eat from that jar of M&Ms?
No, not at all.
Oh, why not?
If it's
think of this in the same way spiritually. If there's any way that it could be tainted, you wouldn't want to risk it.
Right,
so think of that analogy.
Gotcha.
The same way, I had a jar of M&Ms. And there's one of them that's tainted, and we don't know which one it is. You ain't touching that jar, right? You ain't touching it. Eating that. The same thing is when it comes to spiritual.
Okay.
When we eat something, you have to remember when we eat something, it's not only is it the physical, but it's also the spiritual. Remember, what we eat, we are what we eat. So that goes into the body. So that already stays there. Goes into the blood. That already becomes who we are. So you don't want to put anything in the body that's not good for you physically. You don't want to put anything that's not good for you spiritually. The Torah says not to eat, not to eat treif, not to eat milk and meat together, right? It doesn't say anywhere that if you do, you're going to have a heart attack. It does not say that because you see people eat cheeseburgers and they live forever. I don't know about forever, but they live. So now what's the problem? The problem is a spiritual thing. So the same way you wouldn't want to do something that will affect you physically, you don't want to do something that will affect you spiritually.
That makes sense. Okay, we've got time probably for one more. Hey, I'm enjoying this. This is really fun. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this episode.
Oh God!
So we've got time for one more question. I'm gonna leave it up to the callers for that final question. So numbers on your screen. If you don't want to ask a question, you can call and say hi to Rabbi Zirkind. That's perfectly fine. Say hi to me. Just don't cuss me out. Tired. Been a long day. So in 2 weeks,
I just want to say one thing. The question kept on ringing back about somebody that's converting or something, or somebody in that situation.
Don't move to Alaska.
So people are overwhelmed. First of all, I just want to say one thing. Nowhere, one does not have to be Jewish to be a good person. Somebody should never think that I'm not Jewish, I don't count. That's not true. God created us all in His image. We are all one people under one God. Somebody should never think that, I'm not Jewish. Am I okay? God created you. Of course you're okay. Or somebody says, I'm Christian, but I don't practice it. Don't talk to me. I'm not a priest. Don't confess to me. I don't have those little doors. I don't have those little boots.
Right.
Oh, to me, that's between you. When it comes to religion, it's in your heart. So a person shouldn't think like, I have to become Jewish in order to be a person. No, God created you. You're a person. God created a plant. The plant is special. There's nothing that happens in this world that God is not constantly giving life to. So a person shouldn't think like, I have to convert in order to so I could be somebody. So I get, that I'm something. You are something. You're God's child, no matter what. So somebody shouldn't feel like, but I have to convert because it's just, you should do it. A person that converts has to really understand. Judaism is the toughest religion. It is so detailed. Just think about a married couple, without getting into details about that. The laws of marriage, the laws of being together at certain times of the month, and so on and so forth. I know I'm going to another topic altogether, but somebody once asked me, how do you, 2 weeks out of a month you can't be with your wife. How do you deal with it? And I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question. How often are you with your wife? And they're kind of like, what do you mean? Do you really with her 30 days, 30 nights a month? So they're like,
right.
They don't understand. Like, it's the same thing as like, what do you mean on Shabbos you don't work? What is that? How could I have to do my shopping? I have to do everything. Shabbos is a day I've loved ever since I was a little child. It was something that just literally a day for God. You really feel it. It's like you just want to think of positive things. You just want to think about things that reflect your life in a spiritual way. You just want to learn Torah. You want to sing songs at the Shabbos table. You want to go to shul. You want to. I won't say you necessarily always want to hear the rabbi speak. Sometimes it's a good time to sleep. But that's your first rabbi. It reminds me of the story. This rabbi and this taxi driver pass away. So they go up to heaven. So the judge says to the taxi driver, "You go to heaven." Turns to the rabbi and says, "You go to hell." So by the way, that whole discussion about hell, that's another topic. So we won't get into that. Whether Jews believe in hell, that's just for you to discuss.
Right. Gotcha.
Anyway, so the rabbi says, "I don't understand. I've been a rabbi for all these years. Why am I going to hell?" He's a taxi driver. What does he do? God says, "Let me tell you something. When the taxi driver was driving, people were praying in the back seat. When you were speaking, people were sleeping. You got the picture. So Shabbos is a great time to learn. So
Yeah.
people don't understand, because if a person wasn't raised in that and wasn't familiar with it, it's like, no, I got to do my laundry, I got to do my shopping. Sunday I need a day to myself. Switch it.
Yeah.
If you were to switch it, you'll be in good shape. Make Shabbos the day for Hashem. Make Shabbos. That's what she lights the Shabbos candles before Shabbos. You come home from shul, or if there's no shul, you make kiddush, you sing songs, and that's what Shabbos is all about. Now you have a nice meal. All this is part of the beauty of Judaism. But a person has to be able to hack it. It sounds good, but then when it comes to the nitty-gritties, like keeping kosher, it's like, okay, you can't go out to eat every night because there are no kosher restaurants. Whatever those restaurants are and wherever you are, those aren't kosher. It's like you can't say, well, can I just have the fish? No, because everything in that restaurant is trade. So the fish, they got to put it somewhere.
Right. Yep. No, true.
It's not. So a person shouldn't think like, well, I got to become Jewish because they're living it up. It's not about living it up. Judaism is not about living it up. And by the way, just because the person becomes Jewish, it doesn't mean that they become wealthy automatically. It's like when you get a license, a driver's license, doesn't mean you know how to drive and where to go.
Right.
Say, if you actually become Jewish, they have all the money. Yeah, good luck with that one. I'm still looking for. That's why I started working on my second million, because the first one I gave up on.
Exactly. That's funny. Well, I'll tell you what, it's been fun. Let's plan another visit here in 2 weeks. Maybe we can, you and I, or maybe after you share this video in your group, Kosher Kitchen on Facebook, maybe you can ask them to present their questions, like maybe under your post of this video, and that way we can roll those questions over on to next week, the next show in 2 weeks, if you like. Might be a good way to keep our questions lined up and in order as well. So, but thank you all for tuning in. It's been fun.
But I'll tell you one more thing.
Sure.
There's one more thing. There's also kosher, but there's also laws of Shabbos. That's in the groups. There's a laws of Shabbos, which I find the reason why I did that also was because these are two fundamentals in Judaism: is keeping Shabbos and keeping kosher are two fundamentals. If a person keeps Shabbos and he keeps kosher, you could trust him with to be a kosher mashgiach, to be a kosher supervisor, things like that. If he doesn't keep Shabbos and he doesn't he doesn't keep kosher, he's not trusted as a witness when it comes to Jewish law, whether it's different things. So that's FYI. I just putting it out there that there's also laws of Shabbos, and if a person wants to see, there's details about the laws of Shabbos.
Gotcha. Well, that was fun. That was a lot of fun, actually.
Right.
Rabbi, thank you.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, and really appreciate all the viewers out there tuning in, calling in with your great questions. There was some really, really good questions tonight on that. I didn't stuff I would have never thought of without them actually generating those thoughts for me. So that was good. So we'll see you guys a little later. Whenever our next show is. What is today? Tuesday. So got another show tomorrow night. Controversial issues, and then in fact I think we're going to be talking about Noah hides and kosher stuff too on that show as well. And then Thursday night, Shlomo Phillips, World Religions, and then after that it'll be another 10 days before we're in the studio again. So we'll see you guys soon. Thank you, Rabbi. It's been a great pleasure. Shalom,
You're
shalom.
welcome. Likewise. Have a good night. Shalom.
Okay, thank you. You too.